what we are born with is genetics. What we inherit through stories and experiences is epigenetics. How much of our life experiences and perceptions are genetic and how much is learned?
%60 and 40%. So 60% is what you're born with. From the day you're born, though, the outside world starts creating outside events that affect you to a personal level. Why? Because you start making faces. And what happens is, as you keep making faces over time, just like every other muscle in the body, the mind creates movement, movement creates muscle, and then you get muscle memory. And your facial features will start to change over time. It's not an overnight change unless you have a traumatic event. So there are lines right here called like disappointment lines. If you experience a very traumatic, you lose someone suddenly, then that line can deepen almost overnight. But I've never seen one that has changed that quickly that's not associated with a very, very traumatic event. Yeah.
Well, all right. So before we dive into all the specifics, and I would love you to point out some things on me as well to see how we can relate this. How would you define what it is that you do?
So I call it decoding facial features. The reality is it's face reading. So face reading goes all the way back to the Greeks. Aristotle started it. If you go and look it up, the study is called physiognomy. But I can warn you, as soon as you go and Google it, it's called a pseudoscience because it absolutely is. A pseudoscience is when somebody claims something was a science and it's not because it doesn't meet the scientific method where it's 100% repeatable. And so people will read that first sentence and go, oh, it's a pseudoscience, and walk away. I was one of those. I was a skeptic. So the story is, friend came in from out of town. She said, come meet this guy. I said, why should I come meet this guy? She said, he reads faces. And I go, oh yeah, let me rush over there for that one. And she convinced me to go, but because this guy ruined my dinner plans, I was going to prove he was a fraud. And so I went there with, oh, he's going to use these generic statements like, oh, you've had a hard time in life, very generic things. But he's super nice and he won me over. But we sat down at dinner and he dissected everybody's face to a T, including me. And I was like, ooh, I'm interested. But I still thought there's no way because I've got body language books galore, you name it. So I thought, okay, I'll drive from Dallas to Fort Worth. I'll study with this guy. And he won me over. And so I started using it. And I showed you the book earlier. I'd leave the book out when I was traveling. People go, what is that? And I go, well, I took this class. I think this guy's full of crap. Can I ask you some questions? And what I'm finding is it was very accurate. It wasn't 100%, but it was in the 90s, like high 90s. And I was hooked. So that was 14 years ago.
And how much of it is, we say judging a book by its cover, how much of it is that where it's an initial perception that could be wrong before you get to know a person, and how much of it is actually factual?
It's the study of intent. So, for example, it shows who's auditory, who's visual. Well, is that judging someone or is that learning to speak their language? And that's what I really like about the book is there's nothing in here that says, oh, you're a bad person because you have this. Now it says if you have these 3 or 4 features, there's something to pay attention to. But there's not a single thing that says, oh, you have this, therefore we're going to judge you for it. And that's where a lot of people get confused is there was something from the 1700s that came out called phrenology. Now, we're very familiar with the white bust. You see that it looks like the shape of a head, like my bald head. It's got little squares everywhere. That was phrenology. And phrenology was if you have a bump here, oh, you're a criminal, let's go ahead and throw you in jail. So it was very judgmental. And then people confuse epigenetics with eugenics, which was during the World War II. They were trying to breed the perfect race. That's eugenics. This has nothing to do with that. There is no feature we go, aha, we want to keep this one and get rid of that one. That's racism. This is about understanding other people.
So give me an example of a couple of things that you meet someone for the first time. You met me in person for the first time today. What are the telltale signs or the things that you look for initially?
Okay, so we'll use you. So the minute I walk in, everybody goes, oh, are you automatically looking and doing this? No, I have to want to do it. So I wasn't doing it until you just asked. But you have a brow ridge right here. So you're a process-driven person. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. So if you're familiar with like waterfall method, which is you buy something, you get the product. Oh, and then the other ones is you work through things. So you're more of a work through things kind of person. So anytime I'm talking to somebody that has a brow ridge, I know I need to cover every step of whatever project we're working on because they're going to want to reverse engineer it and do it their own way anyway. You also have straight eyebrows, which is get straight to the point, facts, figures, data. Not a lot of fluff, just give me the bare basics of the information. So if I'm delivering anything to you, let's say we're in your house. So if I was selling you a house, I would say things like, what are you looking for? A 3.3, a 2.2, square footage, interest rate, payment, facts, figures, data, right? If you had rounded eyebrows, I'd say, okay, well, here's the master. What are you going to use these other rooms for? People going to come visit you? Because rounded eyebrow people think about the people around them. And then if it's an angled eyebrow like I have, what's the most important room to you? Because I need to know what's my angle. So I'm selling a house to all three people, but I'm going to sell it differently based on what their eyebrows say. So it's still same product, but it's like going to different parts of the world where you go, I'm going to learn this language over here. I'm going to learn this language over here. And I'm going to learn this language over here.
Fascinating. And so it's learning to show up as if it's basically putting yourself in the other person's shoes.
Absolutely.
And then learning to speak the language so that you're able to connect with them on a deeper level.
Correct.
So it doesn't necessarily have much to do with, it makes me completely remove the judgment argument from it, because it's saying, okay, this is how I know you would best interpret this information. And because of that, I can show up and start to speak to you in the way that would make sense to you.
Absolutely. We're all raised with the golden rule, which is treat others the way you want to be treated. But there's a bit of narcissism to that, because you may not want to be treated the way I am. So your face gives me ideas of how I should interact with you to best achieve our goal. So I'm extremely visual. I have an angled eyebrow. So visual people, I would say things like, oh, do you see where I'm coming from? Picture this. If somebody's more auditory, then I know they're more of a listen person. So I'd say like, does this sound like a good idea? Do you hear where I'm coming from? That's just attempting to speak your language instead of just forcing mine the entire time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And how much can someone change? Because I was talking to Joey before this, and I was saying, you ever see someone they're in a difficult or challenging part of their life?
Yes.
Their face looks different when they put a side-by-side photo. So how much
100%.
of these things actually evolve over time, and how much of them are things that are almost concrete?
So there's very few things that are concrete, because underneath the skin is muscle. And so our brain creates the mind creates movement, movement creates muscle. When our parents said, stop making that face or get stuck that way, it's kind of true. So it's as we continue to make faces, our faces change over time. So in my presentations, I show a picture of me at 18 and 38. So my eyes used to angle down a lot. Angled down eyes are people who are worried about the downside of things. So I was raised in a very loving home where they're like, go for it, but things don't always work out. So what's your backup plan? They never said, oh, you're not going to make it, but they're just like, what's your backup plan? So growing up, I always had to think what could go wrong just in case. Well, and so I was on help desk. It served me very well. Why? Because you're always thinking about what can go wrong. As I got into sales and self-improvement, my eye angles adjusted over time. So it's not something that if I saw you a week from today, probably not anything. Depending on what's going on in your life, in a month, there might be something that changes. Over a year or 5 years, a decade for sure, you're going to see changes. So back to your earlier question, genetics versus epigenetics. You can have identical twins raised in the same household, right? So same genetic code, but they have different life experiences. And so that's why even identical twins never stay perfectly looking like identical twins. Because one could have been good at school. One could have been better at athletics. One may have thrived in a romantic life and the other one complete opposite. So you can see little subtle differences in each person.
It's incredible. How does that then shift with racial or regional differences?
So it's everything is in proportion to your own face. And so this one comes up all the time. They go, oh, well, you're being racist towards this. I'm like, no, because it's about each individual person. Because you can line up 10 people from anywhere in the world and their faces are all going to look a little bit different. If there's something you're ever concerned of coming across as rude or crude or anything like that, then it's called a non-read and you skip it and you just move on to something else. Yeah. So I was at an event recently and somebody goes, well, I'm Asian and all Asians don't have eyelids. I'm like, are you sure about that? So then we go and we Google pictures. I like, see, look, you can see a little bit here. And that's the problem is there's a lot of people have been mistreated their entire life. And so when you hear, oh, this is facial features, if they ever have any concern over their own face or have ever been mistreated accordingly, that's going to be their instant gut instinct. I've got a video right now. It's at like almost 3 million views. And that's some of the first things that come out is that or phrenology or, this is racist. I'm like, how is it racist?
It's you showing up and just saying, this is where you're at presently. It doesn't mean that it's shifting or changing a belief in you in either way.
Right. And it didn't say you're dumb or you're smart. It just said, this is how you think and take in information. It didn't say you're an idiot and you're a genius or you're sexy or you're not. None of that's in there. It's literally just learning to understand and speak to other people. That's it.
So let's put this through the lens or in the perspective of someone who would want to utilize this to deepen their relationships or connect deeper with individuals.
Sure.
What are some of let's simplify this a little bit. What would be the first 1, 2, or 3 things that someone could look for that would give them a direct path into deepening that connection?
Sure. So I teach eyebrows first. The reason why is because eyebrows lead to eye contact, which is a lost art. Like you have really good eye contact with people. Most people go, and they look all around. And as you get younger generations, they're more comfortable with technology than they are people. So the idea of I'm 49, public speaking was the biggest fear of my generation's growing up. Now kids having face-to-face scares the crap out of them because they can create the perfect picture, the perfect text, the perfect email. And so when you have a conversation with somebody, you can't perfect anything. And so they're having to do things on the fly and it freaks them out. And so like, well, I teach eyebrows because it leads to eye contact, but just eyebrows alone, when you're walking towards someone, like we can see his eyebrows across the room, right? So he's got eyebrows very close to his eyes, just like you do. So you guys make decisions faster than I do. So eyebrow height, if you think of eyebrows like speed bumps on a forehead, if data's trying to race down your forehead to get into your eye, the lower the eyebrow, that data can race down their forehead. So if I'm talking to somebody whose eyebrows are low, then I go, okay, I'm not going to tell a long-winded story. I'm going to get there faster. But if their eyebrows are high and I need, let's say they're buying something, I know that if I try and push the one call close and they've got high eyebrows, even if I get that close like a good salesperson does, they're going to have buyer's remorse, which either they're going to back out of the deal or they'll never give me another referral. So I'll get the sale, but I'll never have a customer. So that's just eyebrow height. And then we talked about the 3 basic eyebrow shapes, which are straight eyebrows like you have, get straight to the point. Angled eyebrows like I have, what's my angle? Help me understand it first so then I can help other people. Excuse me. When I was young, I had straight eyebrows. When I became a corporate trainer, all of a sudden my eyebrows changed over time. Why? Because I had to learn the material to then teach it to others. So angled eyebrows aren't necessarily a bad thing. So when I say, what's their angle? It's the people have to understand it first, then they can turn around and help other people. And then the 3rd basic eyebrow is rounded eyebrows are people who think about the people around them first. So you talk about their friends, their family, their coworkers. So how could you use this to deepen relationships? So let's say you're married to somebody who has rounded eyebrows. Well, then you don't make it about them. You ask them about their friends, their family, things of that nature. If you're doing it at work, let's say that I'm trying to sell someone something and they have rounded eyebrows. Well, I don't say, once you get this product and you learn it, then you can help your coworkers. You're going to say, the way your customers and clients are going to benefit from this is what? And because I'm making about the other people around them first. So you can do it in pretty much everything you want. I have a course called Looking for Love in allthewrongfaces.com. And I started that because during the pandemic, what did everybody do? They went to online dating. Now, I've never used a single dating app in my life, but I've seen millions of pictures of people because people send them, what does this face say? What does that face say? Well, if you can look at somebody else's face, you can determine what do we have in common and what's different. And there's no right or wrong. But for example, I've been out on dates and somebody who's auditory, I'm visual. So I know I would have to change my language to go, oh, hey, see, look at this, and want to show them things on my phone to, oh, well, does this sound like a good idea? You want to go listen to some music? So it's taking the other person into consideration when you're talking to them. So I know I'm kind of all over the board, but just throwing a few of them out there as simple examples.
Yeah, no, and the initial piece that I think about it that comes back is that you have the ability to read someone else. So you're showing up and putting your best foot forward in terms of how they want to be treated.
Yes.
How has that then affected you when knowing how you want to be treated, but they don't have the same skills that you do?
Well, the funny thing is, if you know what your skills are, you can guide other people. So when I first learned this, the first thing you're going to do, if you ever learn how to decode facial features, is you're going to stand in front of a mirror and go, and kind of look at your own face and hide different things. So going a little more in depth than I usually do, there's 2 sides of everyone's face. There's a personal side and there's a professional side. Now, an easy way to remember it is, if I say, hey, are you married? It's a personal question. A wedding ring goes on this hand. So this is always the personal side over here. So this is someone's business side. So which side are you talking to? Are you talking to their business side or their personal side? Can I use you as an example?
Of course.
So on your personal side, your eye angles down just a little bit, which is you're thinking about the downside, right? Making sure all your bases are covered. But on your professional side, which is this side over here for you, then it angles up a little bit. So you want to focus more on the positive in your work life. You worry about the downside in your personal life. So depending on what I'm talking to you about, it depends, am I going to keep it on the upside or am I going to talk about the potential speed bumps and hurdles that we've already overcome?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And that's 100% true with me as well. I'm very much optimistic on the business side because that's something that I can control.
Yes.
And the personal side, I lost my mom when I was 17. So I'm
sorry to hear that.
I wouldn't be who I am today if that hadn't happened. But because of that, it's challenging for me to open up to people because I'm like, what happens if?
Mm-hmm.
And that then gives me this wall that I believe is protective, even though it's perceived.
Right.
And that is how I've navigated the world up until very recently.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Now, can I pause for 1 second and tell you something? You just witnessed how you can go deeper with someone. All I mentioned was what your face said. I didn't know the story, but now look at how much more I know about you just because I told you what your face says.
Taking a quick break from this episode to remind you that your inputs matter. This show was designed and created to help you build a high-performing, healthy, wealthy life. So if you feel that you're getting value from this episode, please go ahead and share it with someone that you feel would get value as well. Now, fun fact, 90% of listeners of this show are not actually subscribed to the podcast. So if you would take a moment and go ahead and tap the subscribe button, it would mean the world to me. Thank you so much for being here. Now back to the show.
I mean, we're literally strangers on the internet. You emailed me on Thursday and said, when will you be in LA? And I'm like, well, I'll actually be there next week. And so.
Are there any specific health concerns that can be perceived or seen through the face?
Absolutely. See these lines in my ears? Or I'll try to do it by the microphone. These are called heart lines. So if you ever see these lines that are kind of like a little backslashes in somebody's ear, now it's hard to tell on women because they wear heavy earrings, right? But if you see them on a guy, those are heart lines. That means you have to keep your cardiovascular health in check. So you have to go and get blood work done, things of that nature. We're all very familiar with sunken in cheeks because we'll see some more like, what's going on with you? So we've been trained our entire life to understand people based on their facial features. And here's the reason why. The same book I showed you, Physiognomy, which is what it's based on, was taught to authors and artists originally. So that's why every book you ever read, why are all the characters the same? It's because they all took the same classes to do character development. And so they talk about, here they come in with the evil villain with their angled eyebrow, their downturned nose, and their pointed chin. It's because they all took the same class. Same thing is why you can go anywhere in the world. Why do all devils look the same? Why do all witches look the same? Why do all heroes look the same? Because artists also took the same courses to learn to do character development as well. So every book that was required reading when we were kids, the only ways to explain the characters in the book were through their actions and through their facial features. So we're all amateur face readers to a degree. And the crazy part is, it used to be part of the academic system until Henry VIII said, I don't like the idea that vagabonds and thieves can use this against their fellow man. And he had it yanked out of the education system.
Really?
Yeah. Same guy that had his wives beheaded if they didn't, do what they want. And so that's people's big arguments. This is all a sham. And it's not 100%, but neither is body language. Neither is how to win friends and influence people. But I guarantee if you pick it up and you try it, it'll make a world of difference because people know when you're trying to speak their language versus push your own agenda.
Mm-hmm.
We all know the commission breath car salesman. Well, we are all commission breath. It's just easier to see it on the car salesman, but we do it to people all the time.
Yeah. And a lot of people, everyone has an intuition and I feel like a lot of people condition their intuition out of them because they don't end up listening to it. So they shove that side of them aside. Mm-hmm. This is almost a very strategic yet straightforward way that someone could visualize and see something that then could say, does this align with my intuition or not?
Exactly. Well, here's the crazy part. This is why I dove into it when I finally did. This was the first proactive skill that I could ever do. Because why? I could go look at people on the internet before I ever meet with them and go, okay, what does their face say? What do I need to change about my pitch or my proposal? So you can actually do your research ahead of time. Like if I used to be in sales, we go, oh, hey, what charities are they a part of? What do they like? What's their favorite sporting event, sports team? But that tells you their hobbies, not so much about them. So then I could go in and figure out, okay, who am I going to meet with? How do I present the information? So like we talked about you, your eyes angle up. I would focus on the features and the benefits. What are the good things about this? If your eye angled down, your professional side, then I'd focus on, this isn't the first generation of our product. This is what we learned from our failures in the past. Why? Because I'm letting you know
the downsides of what could come.
There you go. So you mentioned on the way in our friend Sam Taggart. So I did a 1-hour interview with Sam and I'm in his new book because he immediately put that to use in meeting people and everything else. So it's not just about sales. Sales teams have budgets. That's why I end up speaking to more salespeople, leadership, team building, team bonding, dating, expanding even existing relationships with your friends and family. Everyone has a face. And so what I like to say is with the face comes grace, because a lot of things that used to bother me, I go, that's just the way they're wired now. So, yeah.
And I think sales gets a bad rap in and of
100%.
itself too. And at every single point in your life, you're selling someone something or you're selling yourself to someone.
Right.
And when you can put yourself in their shoes and understand them based on how they want to be perceived. And it's the same thing with the love languages that we spoke about
Right.
too. It's like, this is how I show love, but that's maybe not how you receive it.
Exactly.
And when you flip-flop this, you can say, okay, well, if I show up and I show this way,
Yeah.
but then I can receive this way, but then I know exactly what you want and what I want, then you're now communicating on this shared language that a lot of people don't necessarily know how to.
That's exactly it. So it's kind of like I went through a divorce and we went through therapy. And I always thought, I don't need any of this, right? But as you're going through family therapy, you're like, oh, I should improve this. Oh, I should improve that. And it's only when you learn more about yourself, not just other people, that you improve as a person in life. Because you realize a lot of things that you may have been doing that you don't even know why you do it. And then it's in front of you. But same thing, when you know things about yourself, like you know that about your personal life, then you know that you go into a relationship, you can say, hey, look, I'm kind of guarded. Going into a relationship, it doesn't mean that it's you. It's the way I'm wired. It's the same thing. Everything on our face tells us a little bit about someone.
And then it's your ability to communicate that, which is then something that that is within your own control.
Yes.
Rather than placing the importance on someone else doing an action and leading with an expectation.
Yes.
Because an expectation that isn't expressed is just a future resentment.
100%. The one thing that I learned is, was that unexpressed expectations will ruin everything. Because if you have these expectations that have never been communicated to somebody else, how are they supposed to know? And that's what, like you said, it builds resentment. And then the little things that you thought were cute in the beginning start to grind on you after a while.
Yeah. How has decoding these facial features and understanding this way to communicate with people, how have you been able to expand your communication skills because of it?
Growing up, I was an introvert. And the funny thing is, I was an introvert who liked being in public. So I liked to be around people, but I didn't have to talk to anybody. Well, people confuse if you're out in public, oh, extrovert. So I would be out at seminars, I'd be out at company events, I'd be out with my friends and sitting here thinking, do I belong here? Should I be here or not? So the problem with being an introvert is if you are out in public, you're in the prison of your own mind the entire time. So you can be surrounded by thousands and alone at the exact same time. But that was me thinking about me. But when I'm focused on you, I'm not thinking about me. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me because it got me out of my own head and out of the prison of my own mind into the present moment. Because focused on you, I stopped thinking about me. If you've ever read the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, what the prisoners who survived were the ones who said, I want to see my wife again. I want to see my husband again. I want to see my kids again. Not the ones, I'm just going to survive this because I hate where I'm at. No, we do more when it's for other people.
And the second that they lost that hope of something or a reason for living was when they were gone very shortly thereafter.
Look at, and this is, we're a little bit on a morbid tangent now, but look at when people pass away, it's when they retire because their sense of meaning, well, who's your identity? Well, I was this job for this many years, and then they don't have that anymore. And if they don't know to pick up a new hobby or find something new that they love, they perish very quickly.
Continuing down that path of identity, I believe it's that if a woman passes first, the husband's very quick to go.
Either way, yes.
It's both ways. Correct me if I'm wrong. I had heard that at one point it was if a woman passes, the man is very quick to go, but a lot of women are able to live without their husband much longer than the husband would have been able to without the wife.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
And I was just, because my grandma passed away earlier or late last year, but if it had been the other way around, I was talking to my father about this, and he was like, if it had been the other way around, it would have been like minutes that my grandfather would have passed.
And I wasn't being rude. I was grabbing my phone because I didn't want to misquote the title of the book. So I'm currently reading Daniel Goleman's Social Intelligence, and they just covered that.
Really?
In here about how soon someone will pass if their loved one So the reason why women tend to last longer is because older women had more friendships than older men did. So if the man has a lot of friends and he loses his spouse, he'll live longer. And the same thing vice versa. But if you don't have a good network of friends, regardless of gender, you'll pass faster.
Because it's a community-driven piece rather than a spousal piece.
Yes. So let's take this outside of just romance. I think every single employee should have a side job or something else, because if you ever get fired and you have nothing else, your entire identity is gone. But if you were working on something else, you had a hobby, you had something else, you don't feel isolated and alone. There's a lot of suicides and things that happen when one or two things happens. Someone gets terminated or somebody gets out of the military. And why? Because the military don't know where they belong again in society. And a lot of people who have been long-term career people, if they suddenly lose that job and they're not allowed, this day and age, companies will say, okay, we fired that person. Nobody here can talk to them. So you're telling people that you've worked with for 20 years not to talk to anybody else. So not only do they no longer have their work title and identity,
They don't have the friendships.
they don't
that they
have
had
the
either.
friendships. Yes, because we're at work 8 hours a day versus how much time do we have every day to build and bond friendships? So it's a very interesting time that we're in, just because everybody's so litigious this day and age.
Yeah, and that's one of the core foundations of blue zones too. When we dive into the longevity of these regions around the world, one of the core features, one was gratitude, but the second was community.
Yes.
And that's something that I think in Western society we've taken for granted. And I moved to LA 2 years ago. The reason I came back to LA was because of the community that I had created. And I was talking to a friend, I'm from Arizona, and I was talking to a friend back home, and they're like, why did you stay in LA? I was like, I didn't know a community that I have here existed.
Yes.
I didn't know that was possible to have friendships like I have here.
Yes. Well, I'm here because Steve Sims has an event going on this weekend called the Speakeasy. They're doing a dinner today, 2 days of classes, and I'm actually in his mastermind. They're meeting the mastermind's meeting Wednesday, but I can't attend any of that. But I knew it was worth it for me to fly here and be here 23 hours, just have dinner and be around like-minded people for 3 to 4 hours tonight, 4 hours tomorrow, and fly home. That was worth a 6-hour trip in the airline to be here. Because when you find that kind of community, you'll make every effort to get there.
Have you always had that connection to community, or was it something you discovered?
No, it's something I discovered. So I had friends growing up, but I had a job that traveled quite a bit. So I used to sell technology to jails and prisons. And when you go somewhere, it's not these nice hotels that have a bar in it that you can meet people while you're traveling. It's like Hampton Inn, everywhere you go. And so I had traveling jobs, so I had to be sociable because I was traveling, but I luckily had a core group of friends, but I didn't initially have that. The funniest thing is the friends I made in junior high and high school were my friends in college. And then in college, I worked full time. I had a weird childhood in that it was by choice. I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I read a book called The Doctors, I think a long time ago, and I thought I wanted to be pre-med. So instead of going to high school all day, I did co-op, which was starting from 10th grade on. I left at lunch and went and worked at a hospital. So I didn't go through your typical schooling, which was, I left at noon. So I was at the hospital by 1. So I didn't go to pep rallies. I didn't go to football games. I didn't go to sporting events. I literally went to school and I went to work. And so I had work friends, but I didn't have high school friends other than the friends I'd met early on. And so the same thing, I went to junior college because I couldn't afford college right after high school. So that was like high school part 2. And by the time I went to college, I still had to pay for college. So my parents helped me for the first semester. And then after that, I had to work. Well, I bartended. I was a bouncer. I was a bartender. So I would go to school, go straight to the bar. So I was good at making work friends, but not this big, vast network of friends. I moved back, moved in with 3 of my buddies I knew from high school. And then me and that guy moved to Dallas after we both broke up with our girlfriends. And we were good because I had a built-in wingman everywhere I went. And then he got engaged. I'm like, oh, crap, what am I going to do now? Like, I know the bartenders and that's about it. Because they would ask me like, hey, you want to be a bouncer? Like, here's the funny thing. I'm a big dude, but all I'm going to do is bleed all over you. Like I've taken some Muay Thai and I did like a keto for 1 year and that's it. But by pure size, and I guess I look mean, but I'm not. So I knew the bartenders and everybody. Well, one time I was at this bar and a bunch of people came in teams. They were all having fun and they were playing flip cup. And I'm like, what is this? It was adult kickball, changed my life. So at 35 years old, I joined adult kickball and you met up as a team. You drank on the field, you played kickball, and then you went back to the bar and bonded more. And because it was a whole age ranges and it was in downtown Dallas, that filled my social calendar for the rest of my life. There's not a time I can't pick up the phone and be like, all right, what's going on this weekend? And there's something between that. And I don't know if out here they have what they call BVB, flag football for women, which is blondes versus brunettes. Well, most of the kickball people were also coaches for blondes versus brunettes or BVB. So then between those two sports, I had something going on all the time. And that changed my life because all of a sudden I had friends. And then I started traveling to Europe with people that were from Poland that I met through kickball people. So I went to a Polish wedding and like all this stuff happened. But that was a result of getting out of my comfort zone, but having the skills now that when I was around people, focusing on them, not focusing on me.
I think we forget about the importance that clubs and events and even sports can play into building community because you're bonding over a shared experience, but also something that can be challenging and competitive.
Yes.
So you rally behind the team or the individual as well.
Right.
And then you expand your relationship that way too.
Well, if you look at people who do athletic activities together, create that bond. And that's why they'll tell you, like, if you want, Tony Robbins say, like, if you want to change your mind, move, like get up and move and that change your mindset at the same time. Yeah. So when you're doing physical activities, you mentioned the way you'd like to normally record a podcast. Why? Because you're time shifting things of you're doing things with the people, but when you physically do things with people, we're in more rapport. So walk next to somebody on the treadmill, and what you'll notice is you'll speed up, or even if you're walking down the street, all of a sudden you're both walking at the same time, without realizing it.
I think you have to be careful about that too, with the people that you surround yourself with, because you're going to start to be like someone you might not want it to be.
100%. We all hear that cheesy, I say, it sounds cheesy till you really look at it. You really are the 5 people you surround yourself with. And so the best thing that happened to me is COVID. When I say that, I will retract that. The good thing that happened to me during COVID was I started going, what things am I doing on autopilot? What things am I going to be more intentional about? And so where I used to go out and blow money, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I'm like, wait a minute, I want to go to this seminar and go learn something else. And so I was still had my friends, but I was also expanding my networks at the same time. And that's the whole reason I'm sitting here today was I learned this skill, and it took me from help desk to regional vice president of sales with a $40 million book of business. So the skill helped me body language, statement analysis, decoding facial features. But I was still going to seminars, and people go, oh, is work paying for it? And I'd say, no. They go, why are you going? I'm like, because I never want to stop learning. And luckily those relationships that I made is what helps me to sit in the seat right now. Like literally I met Steve Sims on somebody else's podcast, and I said, hey, Steve, you need to trim this mustache so we can see your upper lip, because if not, you're seen as unapproachable. If you know Steve, he goes, you think I care? And I'm like, all right, well, cool. But I followed up with him and I said, this is the reason I told you this. This is what I taught. And he goes, want to be on my podcast? I said, sure. I went and did his podcast. He goes, you want to come speak at my event? I'm like, hell yeah, I want to come speak at that event. That was the second stage I was ever on, and that changed my life.
Mm.
Yeah.
And your ability to, become approachable because the way that you're able to present yourself, because you know how other people may perceive you.
Yes.
And then shift that and talk to people and integrate with them in a way that you know that they want to be heard too, allows you to create that connection and that rapport with someone that you may not have had to or may not have been able to in the past. Yes.
Most people converse to figure out what can I get out of someone else. When you make it about how can I learn about someone else, that's what changes things. So, you can go and I'm currently reading the book Be Seen by Jen. I'm going to screw up her last name. Gottlieb, or, Gottlib. And she's talking about networking is about really learning about the other person, not talking about yourself. But most people aren't taught that. What we're taught is, hey, what do you do? Which we all hate that question. So I like to ask people, now that we can travel again, where are you going to go on vacation? Because people show up to work, people plan out their vacation.
Yeah. Be more interested rather than interesting.
100%. Yes.
That is very interesting.
Right.
Back to, just to double click back on the facial features themselves for a moment. Are there any specifics that are telltale signs that should be avoided or you should become very cautious of?
Let's use it in work profession. If I meet someone who is the employer that I'm talking to and they have an eye puff right here, that means that they push themselves so hard. So I immediately think, are they workaholics? So I'm going to dive in deeper to that, because the problem with having a workaholic manager is they want workaholic employees. And I'm more about work-life balance, or at least I was when I was a corporate employee, right? Like I stayed at a company for 21 and a half years because I had 6 weeks of vacation. Now, there were some people who never used their vacation. I'm like, hey, we earned it. Let's go take it, right? But so if I saw somebody who had an eye puff, I would worry about working for them. Now, there's also other things up. Downturned noses, they say, well, that's like people hiding the oxygen to get to their nose because they're hiding their nostrils. Now, the opposite of that is if somebody's nose angles up, then they're up for listening to you talk about anything. But watch any show that's got the villain, and it's always angled eyebrows, downturned nose, and pointy chin. So if I saw a downturned nose, I'd ask questions, because is it the ends justify the means, which is, oh, you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet? Well, sometimes you need that. There are certain people that drive change. And if you look, a lot of them have that downturned nose. So it's things I'd pay attention to, not anything I'd immediately run away from. But that eye puff, I would dive in. What's a typical work week like here? Do you guys work on weekends? Like there was somebody who used to work for, their meetings started Sunday night because he wanted his team ready for the Monday workday. And then he worked them 8 to 10 hours a day, each day. I would not work for somebody like that. And guess what? Eye puff.
So it's less about what to avoid, but more about what to recognize so that you can double click and expand upon and learn more about where that person's coming from.
Absolutely. So I'll give you one in a positive vein that you got to double check on. If somebody has a little line, I can show you in the book, below their nose and above their upper lip, when they smile, and you'll see it out here in LA because a lot of actors and actresses have this. Because why? They put on a smile for the camera. If they do it for so long, they've got a little line here when they smile. So that's a default smile, which is good because we all have mirror neurons. When you smile, I want to smile. But that means I don't know, are they smiling out of default or are they truly happy? So I'm going to have to double check and go, all right, now I'm not going to tell them why I know that is, but I'll be like, well, it looks like you're smiling, everything's happy. What else can we work on? Are you really good with this deal? Because that smile is a default mechanism. Now, a lot of times I'll say when people come up on stage at the end of me talking, if somebody has that, I'll say, you were likely raised in an environment where you were told to always have a smile on your face. Is that correct? And they'll go, yeah. Now, like I said, here in LA, it's going to be different. Why? Models, actors, actresses, a lot of people putting on a smile because they're part of a show. But in your normal day-to-day life, if I see somebody with that, I'm going to double check every time they smile. Are they truly happy? Or is this their default safety mechanism?
They may not actually be happy. They're just doing this to put on a front.
Correct. I can show it to you right here in the book. I'll look it up while so you can see it while I'm talking about it.
There's three, as you say that, there's three people that come to mind that I think about when I see them. And I've never put two and two together as if, are they actually happy?
Right.
But all three of them work in the two of them work in the industry. One of them works in finance. And the person that works in finance has to show up to meetings with a smile on. Otherwise, they're not going to get business.
So look at that forced smile line that's right there. So while he's looking for everybody in the audience, this is the book from 2010 that I actually studied for under my mentor, Mac Fulfer. And that was one of the first things I learned to look for is if somebody smiles, if they have that line, is it a real smile or is it a default smile?
And hides negative feelings, cut off from emotional support. That's case in point, her as well.
Right.
Doesn't allow support from anyone.
Exactly. It's crazy, right? Like, there's all these things that now that you've learned it, you can look at people and go, this is just how I can understand them differently. So back to what I said earlier, with the face comes grace. Everyone's face tells us a little bit about them. And the best part is if you can say something that you see on their face, they open up and share just like you did about why your personal eye angles down.
It's the same thing with sales. You label what's going on. You label the situation rather than avoiding it, because when you label it, it gives them permission to share.
Absolutely. Since you're talking about that, I've just reread Chris Voss's book because he was at Sam's event. He was one of the keynotes at Door to Door Con. And I went to the back to the green room because I was speaking the next day, but I wanted to meet Chris and talk with him. And he's a super nice guy. We talked for like 30 minutes. And in his book, he says, you don't say, I notice, you say, it seems like, because when you say it seems, it's putting it out to something else. Not, I noticed something about you, but it seems like you're a little bit upset. Instead of, why are you upset? That's judgment. It seems like you're upset, puts it out there that it's some third party that kind of noticed something going on. So those little things make, those little things, Steve likes to say, it's one of his friends' quotes, little hinges swing big doors. Little things like that make a huge difference.
Well, Brian, this has been absolutely fascinating and super interesting as well. I want to double click and go much, much deeper on this, but I know for sake of time, we got to bring it to a close here relatively soon. What is a question that I haven't asked that I should, as relates to being able to decode facial structures and deepen connections with people?
Sure. I'll give one that it's a very easy one to see on someone. When we first go up to someone, have you ever heard the phrase, keep a stiff upper lip? We usually say it to somebody who's going through a tough time. We want them to be very stoic, don't share emotions. Well, that phrase alone, if somebody has a flatter or thinner upper lip, that means don't ask them a lot of personal questions immediately. Because when you do, they put a wall up. So if you see somebody that has a flatter upper lip, ask them about external things. Ask them about their job. Don't ask them a lot of personal questions. Hey, what do you do for fun? What are hobbies? But if you ask a lot of personal questions very fast, you're like, why do you need to know that? But if somebody has a fuller upper lip, then you don't ask them personal questions. That feels like it's transactional. Why are you trying to use me? That's the reason why women, what's the number one plastic surgery right now? Lip enhancement. That's the entire reason why lip enhancement is such a big deal. This is your personal lip for anybody who's listening. Upper lip is your personal, lower lip is your professional. And when you look at someone, you can look and see which one's larger. And that means what do they like to talk about more? If you go to a lot of former communist countries where they weren't allowed to have an opinion and they had to do this lot, lip suppression, it actually flattened out lips over time.
Really?
So if you go to, you'd have to look at older people from those times. Go look at, I've been to Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, a lot of flatter upper lips. And you'll know if somebody's in a bad relationship and they can't have a voice because they'll have a flatter upper lip too. Even if they get their lips done, they'll do this so much. They'll flatten them out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. There's the rabbit holes of this are endless. This is
Yes.
incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for spending the time
for having me.
and coming out here today. Final question for you today as relates to all of this.
Sure.
The most simplistic input. So let's pull this back as most simplistic as someone can that's listening.
Yes.
What would be the biggest input someone could do in order to get the largest return as relates to facial decoding?
You don't even have to just look at eyebrows and think, are they high, are they low, and what shape are they? You don't even have to memorize and change what you want. But when you do that, it creates eye contact. Eye contact is a lost art. If you start doing that to people, you'll make people feel seen and heard again, and it'll change the dynamic of everything. So we're distracted by technology, sounds, things moving around all the time. If you give people your authentic time and attention for 1 second, and you're actually focused on them, it'll change the dynamic of everything.